A maze of highways crowds the Cincinnati Riverfront and the surrounding stadiums, high-end bars, restaurants, parks, and entertainment venues. Although the bustling area now draws in large amounts of visitors and revenue, it once had a very different role in the city. Thanks to the Ohio riverbank, Cincinnati grew to become a prominent city. The steamboat industry powered its growth, creating a bustling city core along the shore. Time, along with the 1948 Metropolitan Masterplan, changed everything. This change was part of an infamous and controversial movement in urban planning, one called urban renewal, in which bulldozers leveled neighborhoods nationwide. Around the 1950s, fears of the inner city crumbling ran rampant. Clearing these so-called blighted areas and replacing them with new developments was heralded as the solution. Supporters hoped these efforts could revive nearby central business districts and bring in more revenue. Middle-class suburbanites traveling by car became the target of these projects. They were seen as saviors of the CBD, who could fix things by injecting their wealth and consumership. Things were no different in Cincinnati. Cincinnati's Waterfront urban renewal project resulted in an extreme land use shift from residential to highways and entertainment, allowing suburbanites to flood in and use these facilities. But what happens to the communities who already built a life in these blighted areas designated for renewal? Not only did land use completely change, so did the land users. The riverfront was home to predominantly Black communities, immigrants, and working-class residents. Despite the struggles these communities faced, they had created a vibrant culture and an area that supported businesses and families. This change completely displaced these populations, and it reveals nationwide insights into urban renewal. Land use changes were not created to benefit the original population, and in a broader context, reveal that urban renewal initiatives, despite monetary values, were often not directly beneficial for the people they displaced. One neighborhood has become an infamous case study of urban renewal's destruction. Kenyon Bar, also known as the West End, was home to a rich culture and interconnected community. It provided employment opportunities for Black citizens and was full of homes and businesses. Opportunities for Black residents were more limited in other parts of Cincinnati, making the neighborhood especially important to them. Although Black Cincinnati residents faced discrimination and segregation, the West End provided them housing they could afford, places of worship, and even opportunities to advance social justice. Organizations like the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, were prominent in Kenyon Bar and fought for civil rights advancements in Cincinnati. Notable members of the Cincinnati branch included Wendell P. Dabney, the first branch's president, and Theodore M. Berry, Cincinnati's first Black mayor. Despite the opportunities and civil rights advancements happening in Kenyon Bar, the neighborhood was selected for destruction. All occupants of this property must move. Residents received this notice in the mail after preliminary plans for destruction in 1958. The 70% of Cincinnati's Black population that resided in the West End had been completely pushed out. Over 25,000 people, 10,000 dwelling units, and hundreds of businesses were completely upended. Residents moved to areas such as modern-day Avondale, Bond Hill, Mount Auburn, and Walnut Hills. They were promised adequate housing and replacement, but this promise fell short. 27% of Kenyon Bar residents ended up in housing without working toilets. After displacement, the razing began. The city planned for this area to be a new industrial and commercial center. Planners hoped a new mixed use would attract tenants and bring business into the nearby CBD. However, the area is now home to only 200 residents. Choppy transportation lines cut up the area and divide it from the rest of the area. Highway I-75 completely cuts it off from the east. Similar stories were popping up across historic riverfront neighborhoods. The reason why? Blight. The 1948 Metropolitan Masterplan hoped that raising and replacing areas with high vacancies and low tax revenue with highways and entertainment venues would bring in revenue and revitalize the adjacent center of business district. After surveying, 3 main problem areas were found along the riverfront. The first one was the east section, located east of Butler Street. The second was the west section, or the West End, and the third was the central section. In total, the project comprised of 432 acres of land. In this section, there was once a neighborhood called the Bottoms that experienced complete erasure after its blight designation. Although little remains now, the Bottoms neighborhood had deep historic roots in Cincinnati. It was a melting pot of working-class people drawn in by railroad and industry. In its early stages, many businesses thrived here, such as Pearl Market, the city's first marketplace. It was also home to historic buildings such as the Spencer House Hotel. The neighborhood, shown in green, extended from 6th Street to West Walnut Street. Over time, the stretch of land fell victim to vacancies and crime, garnering a poor reputation. The Planning Commission deemed it blighted, calling it a waste of space and a social liability with no help of self-improvement. The blight determination was a self-fulfilling prophecy. The Bottoms was torn down and construction on Fort Washington Way began. This section of Highway I-71 ripped through the existing urban fabric. This is a drastic land use change from the original warehousing areas and neighborhoods located here. This change was a common theme among the riverfront redevelopments. This is because the comprehensive plan saw this land as a prime opportunity for major highways, parks, and entertainment facilities. Highways included both I-71 and I-75. In 1968, construction began on Riverfront Stadium, which served as a playing field for both the Cincinnati Reds and Bengals. However, it required the displacement of businesses such as Hilltop Basic Resources. The Riverfront Coliseum, opened in 1975, also drew in people for hockey games, political rallies, figure skating, and more. Parks also saw a major expansion in the area, with new additions such as Light Park. However, this change came with destruction to the existing riverfront landmarks. Some notable losses were the Mount Adams Incline on the eastern side of the renewal project. Once a popular way to travel up steep slopes in the city, Mount Adams was the last of its kind and was lost in 1948. Other losses include the Lou Wyland Cafe and Spencer House Hotel in the Bottoms, and a historic library. Even the style of the city went through a drastic change, as shown here in the Duke Energy Convention Center's conversion. Everything had changed. Intense city change warrants the question, who is the change created for? Cincinnati followed urban renewal patterns nationwide. The National Interstate and Defense Highway Act of 1956 encouraged the building of transnational highways. The Federal Housing Act also encouraged renewal projects through Title I funds. The Cincinnati Riverfront project received $8,726,080 in October of 1962. However, these initiatives on a national scale tended to be targeted towards white middle-class suburbanite commuters, and Cincinnati's urban renewal story appears to follow that theme. The redevelopment was completely surrounded by highways. These allow suburban commuters to funnel into the area through multiple connections. This development decreased the connectivity of the city, cutting off the central business district from the riverfront area. Although the highway systems may have increased accessibility for the suburban commuters, it made things more difficult for actual residents. Many of these actual residents don't live in and directly benefit from the area anymore. They've mostly been scattered to the other side of the river or past the highway, creating connectivity issues for them. This transition was also clearly not aimed at benefiting the existing Black population, as the case of Kenyon Bar demonstrates how they were completely displaced and their businesses were destroyed. Like most renewal projects, Cincinnati took the route of destroying and remaking instead of investing in and improving the city. When inner-city neighborhoods faced struggles, the city turned its back on them and pushed them to the side. While resources were spent creating a new riverfront, businesses and homes were destroyed, historic city landmarks were lost, and residents were left without provisions of adequate housing. Renewal neglected the residents that still existed regardless of raising, and serves as an example of the danger that progress can pose if it does not serve the people it costs. Today, the city has the opportunity to improve upon negative impacts that intense land use changes created. Cincinnati could scope out areas that have experienced the generational impacts of this project. The residents in these areas could be given the opportunity to communicate what they need, and the city could work out a way to provide for those residents with what the city and riverfront has to offer today. Cincinnati has taken up new projects including better walkways, bike paths, and other ways to access the riverfront.